Hello, SCP Universe, and welcome to another episode of SCP Cafe. This is 2019, Week 3. I'm your host, Blue Soul, SCP Wiki moderator, chat operator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, and most recently, sinus infection haver. I've been under the weather since last Thursday or so, when I was supposed to run this podcast, and getting a little better as the week's gone on. Still not 100%, still probably a little congested sounding, but hopefully that won't be too much of an impediment. Going to do the best I can to get through this Week 3 and get to Week 4 tomorrow with any luck. So little double shot for you over the next 2 days. We are smack in the middle of ClichéCon, and that is reflected in the number of skips that were posted in Week 3. 24 of them stayed up. 54 of them didn't make it, but that's a really high retention rate for any given week. So I'm only covering 5 this week. I'm confident in these 5 picks. Everything that made it in the positives has at least some redeeming quality to it. There was, something good in every one of the entries, and that's, typically how it goes for the course of the week. But this is going to be a little more of an abbreviated show, just in the name of expediency this week. Just a reminder before we get going, you have almost exactly 1 week left for getting your entry in for ClichéCon. It does need to be positively rated before the deadline on the 31st. If you haven't posted by now, you really need to get going. You've got 1 week left. Additionally, I neglected in either of the podcasts last week to mention the IRC channel for the show. It is on Sin IRC, much like the rest of the SCP Foundation official IRC chat rooms. It is simply the channel name is SCP Cafe, and I will, I'm there sometimes going over things. Not terribly active yet, but come join. Always curious to hear what people have to say, and would love to see you there. And apologies in advance. I think the audio quality on this one may be a little below my normal standards, but just in the name of expediency and still attempting to get over this sinus infection. I couldn't speak. I could barely speak above a whisper last Friday. So I can hear it just in the playback I've done so far. I don't sound great, but I appreciate your willingness to stick it out with me, because there is a lot of really good stuff this week to cover anyway. So we're going to get started with SCP-4205. This is titled In the Eyes of the Beholder. It was written by Wodenaz, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is the single most impressive thing I have ever seen posted to the wiki. And that's not really an exaggeration. I have never seen this much effort put in to the CSS and JavaScript of a page. It is presented as an old style, like an Apple II looking computer terminal, complete with a power button, animated Foundation logo, and a full, computer within a computer display. There's onboard sound of like a little coil whine as the monitor fires up. This is absolutely incredible. And to top it off, the story going on behind the scenes isn't too bad either. What we have is basically a presentation of a junior researcher creating a draft of an SCP entry. This is very meta. This entire article is pretty meta. And the first page you have is them sort of roughing out their draft, and they send it on to their supervisor, and it's reviewed. The review status is denied. And they say, this is sloppy. Object classes are based on ease of containment, not danger. And what the hell is threat level? Did you make that up? There are so many errors here. I will come to your desk and assist in person. You are not in university anymore. You need to do better. And As this thing goes on, they slowly build up the backstory of this SCP that basically manifests as a pair of amber-colored eyes that can appear within translucent materials of a window or glass sort of nature. And as this goes on, you see corruption introduced into the work, and there's all sorts of neat little CSS-based and JavaScript-based trickery as little elements sort of go fuzzy and, blink and reappear. It feels like, it doesn't feel like my old school of actually having used an Apple II back in the mid-90s. It doesn't feel like how corruption actually worked, but it's still a really neat trick. It's a cool gimmick, and I'm totally by it, hook, line, and sinker. As the work progresses, you come to learn that these eyes somehow kill people, but not the person that is writing the work on here. And as it gets interspersed with what look like a journal or like diary entries to this junior researcher's dad. And I used to do stuff like this too. This is actually like kind of touched me because I would write stuff to my dad along these lines too. We were 3 time zones away, half a country away, and I would write to him on stuff that was going on at work, as he was an old retiree, and he still wanted to know what was going on. So this actually feels really natural. All of the dialogue that is written and presented here in this journal format, and as it kind of goes in and out of this very common speech, but also them trying to figure out, okay, what all do I have to say to have this proper tone for the SCP entry? Very meta, but all of the dialogue in here works really well. The work proceeds to sort of a revised version of the first draft that you saw, and it includes handy little new markers for new insertions into the work, and includes the first casualty, which was a GOC liaison, and that this incident of this person, these eyes manifest. They make eye contact apparently with the eyes and immediately drop dead, and not a great look for the Foundation. And it still slips in and out of this. Basically, they comment in a line that says, "Fill out the rest, you lazy bastard," as though they've done some of it and they're gonna come back and do the rest later. It goes from there to another journal entry where the researcher's trying to piece together 6 other people have died at this point, but this guy made eye contact with it at well and didn't die, and can't figure out what's so special about him. We go from there to a highly corrupt page that does some really cool CSS trickery with, flipping text upside down and doing all kinds of wild shit, where they introduce a couple of additional casualties. And at a couple of points in here, footnotes are used to introduce the researcher that's writing this, still having their own reservations and their own opinions on the tone of the Foundation, and things like pointing out that a chef at a particular site dropped dead while taking making a birthday cake for their 3-year-old daughter. And the footnote says, Mark's going to tell me this isn't important, but whatever, I'm a human, this is important to me. And there's a couple more of these with like the Site 19 janitor. And what's notable in here is that this anomaly doesn't seem to have any sort of ability. Like, it can manifest wherever the hell it seems to feel like it, because one of these, it's in Site 19 in January 5th, and March 18th of the same year it strikes again in Site 11, and in November it's at Area 14, and actually neutralizes an SCP. This is SCP-048, and I believe this is the canonically correct SCP-048 as well. And as the list of the casualties goes on, the researchers getting a little more lazy as they go. Part fill this in later. This guy was probably boring. And then there's a note that says Theo isn't boring, though. And we have an affected individual that says Dr. Theodore Quayle. This is important, and we'll come back to this. In 1992, this Dr. Quayle observed SCP-4205 within the window, which also contained SCP-965. And similar to our junior researcher in question, Dr. Quayle did not immediately die like the other victims. And the observation was not discovered until Dr. Quayle reported an incident of 965 apparently having eyes now. And when pressed for information, they gave a description matching the other incidents. And there's no direct video feed, so there's no recorded confirmation of the encounter. But Dr. Quayle was not aware of 4205's existence prior to this encounter. We then have an experiment log on this same page that involves our junior researcher. And we have a date that says December 13th, 1992. This is only 4 days after Dr. Quayle. And supervisor is Dr. Mark, and it says clearance level 3 not present. The description of the experiment log is, I tried to touch it. I saw it again and I tried to touch it. The results were, it felt like when you rub two balloons together and touch one to your arm, except all over my body. I couldn't really touch it though. It's not in front of the glass or behind the glass, it's in the glass, and I can't tell if it's looking at me or not. Is it even really eyes? So we go from there to further entries. This is presented as you click next, and a command appears to be typed in that says more-D, and then an entry for this particular anomaly. We go to journal entries, and he mentions Quayle and says that he thinks he's starting to hallucinate and have night terrors. And, it kind of comes to pass at the end that, he's writing this to his dad, but his dad's not actually getting any of them because he's just sort of writing into the void on a machine that is not going to get out in any real way. We go to another draft that's got corruption in it, and as this goes on, it's more and more colloquial, and you can tell that this is the same junior researcher, and they're getting quite a bit more upset with things, possibly becoming flat out suicidal, and pointing out that the other 6 bastards were the lucky ones. And we go from there to another journal entry where it's revealed that the Foundation has been fully able to read these journal entries to his dad, and he's pretty pissed at the situation, and pointed out that his supervisor berated him for 3 hours, calling him unprofessional, a child, dense, idiotic, should never have been allowed to graduate. He never should have helped me, and what did he see in me? And those were all his words. And but at this point, it also breaks to say that he sees the eyes everywhere now. In the window in the living room, window in the kitchen, the bedroom. Not the window in my front door, though. It doesn't like that window. I swear I even saw the bastard in my water glass earlier. And he's, still pissed at the Foundation, puts a nice little ASCII middle finger at the bottom of this entry. And as we keep going, the tests, it's a test log, and the author has changed their name in the work from Junior Researcher Wade to Prisoner Wade. And the writing's getting really off the rails. They're getting, appear to be very unstable. They're doing some basic tests. I shined a flashlight at it. I poked the glass with a broomstick. I tried to have a chat with it. And the result of trying to have a chat with it said it took a while, but it responded. I can't write here what it said. It told me not to. I tried to play catch with it and broke a window with the ball, and I can see it in the shards of glass. Test 5 is to touch it. The result, no. No. I won't. So it's getting creepier as you go. The whole piece does escalate really well. And every time we have one of these things with, as the stakes kind of rise and the tension builds, the corruption will sort of flicker, and you'll see all this weird shit happen with the terminal at the same time. It's an element that we've never used before. I have never seen this work in this way, where they can introduce corruption and really heavy graphical glitching as almost as a narrative element. It builds suspense as good as anything else out there. So we have what appears to be another journal entry, and really highly corrupt file. The next draft has gone completely off the rails. The researcher appears to be completely insane. There's a lot of babbling and talking about it's Theo, and ends with "Can it have eyes?" And as you hit next page, we have corrupt data and even more of this really insane rambling. And at the bottom of it, we have data corruption critical. Risk of full system corruption, and a button that says accept and continue, which you can click, and it slowly types out, "Can it have eyes?" And then the little computer basically turns off and powers back on, and what we have is a new document on the database, and this is the final definitive SCP-4205 entry. And what it breaks down basically is that it more or less coincides with our junior researcher's initial assessment, except there's a little note that says early testing has revealed that SCP-4205 appears to be negatively affected and or repelled by lead glass. And we have a special procedure 4205 Delta that says effective immediately, all panes of glass or glass-like material at all sites and areas within affected Foundation sites will be replaced with lead-impregnated glass or coated with lead glazing. So that might explain some things. We go to a description that says that 4205 is a visually perceived cognitohazardous anomaly presenting as two adjacent amber-hued luminous oculiform objects within a transparent medium. And so far it's appeared in tempered glass, frosted glass, float glass, prototype mimetic hazard polymer shielding, and plexiglass. And that any sentient being directly viewing 4205 will undergo immediate and irreversible brain death with all measurable neurological activity ceasing within 500 milliseconds of exposure. And any digital video footage captured during an SCP-4205 viewing event invariably causes some level of distortion and corruption. Frame-by-frame analysis of these recordings demonstrate individual frames displaying various locations frequented by the affected individual. Analysis of this effect is ongoing. And below that, we have a video that's embedded in this computer within the computer, and it's got two glowing amber eye-shaped lights with little red pupils. And we go from there to a note that says, in one instance, the Foundation terminal that an affected individual had been using during the viewing event was later found with severe textual and data corruption. And according to network editing logs, in the 2.5 hours between the viewing event and examination of the terminal, the files, and there's file names on here that correspond with all the things you just read previously, were sequentially inserted, archived, and given priority database positions for SCP-4205, and attempts at removal have been unsuccessful. And what we basically have are our junior researcher has died. It doesn't really indicate what happened to him, but it does point out that analysis of all transparent materials at the researcher's home found that the windows installed into the main entrance door was coated in a 34% lead oxide glaze. And this led to the implementation of a special procedure 4205 Delta. And that is, we have a special note at the bottom that says, a search of the Foundation personnel database for a Dr. Theo Quayle did not result in any matches. Foundation agents later identified a Dr. Theodore Quayle, former university classmate of our deceased junior researcher living in Fargo, North Dakota. Questioning of this individual has thus far not been deemed necessary. End article, and we click the power off button on our little computer within a computer. The story is good, And it is just so incredibly amplified by we'll call it the special effects, the work that's put in on the visual side to, take this from what would have been a good SCP to, the most, like I said, this is the most impressive thing I've ever seen implemented on the site. The sheer amount of work, not in the least just to get it to work within the Wikidot ecosystem, is something I tip my cap to. But over the course of these articles and going into the ending here, it does a really good job of hooking you, of getting you interested in figuring out where this goes. And I think it's partially because of the way that this is constructed. It's broken out into discrete parts that you have to click next through, but it's also well written. There's enough little things there to turn over in your head as you keep going and keep thinking about it. I have nothing but good things to say about it. The community has generally agreed because this is rated at plus 284 in just 13 days. This is also a ClichéCon entry, and this is right now your undisputed winner. It's a full 40 points ahead of second place SCP-1322-J, which we covered back in the Week 1 Part 2 recap. And if I didn't make myself clear, I really think I have, but if I haven't, if you are a fan of the SCP Foundation, and if you are a fan of seeing the Foundation presented in new and interesting ways, you absolutely must see this. Do not take this audio version of things as anything more than a rude introduction to what this work is. This is absolutely a must-see. Moving on, we have SCP-4636. It is titled, I Must Confess, I Must Confess, and it was written by 440 Hertz. We actually covered another of 440 Hertz's works on the last show. It is the one directly adjacent to this, SCP-4637, and it had to do with the ethics, the Resource Allocation Committee, and the sort of split dual consciousness work that we covered in the Week 2 Part 2 recap last week. And this thing kicks off with special containment procedures that indicate that unless you've been explicitly ordered to obtain information about 4636, avoid all data related to it. Exposing yourself to the unabridged version of this document is grounds for demotion and cognitive purge of all Foundation activities. It's not very good. If authorized, enter your access code below, you do so, and it has a preface of a disclaimer that says the following document, while entirely factual, breaks several technical writing guidelines. Interesting way to introduce a format screw. It then says that attempts to edit, displace, or remove irrelevant sentences may be detrimental to research and containment. See description section 4. It then says, I feel terrible for how much this inconsequential stylistic issue bothers me when I know my duty is to focus on ensuring SCP-4636 remains harmless. So we have an item number and an object class of Euclid and a picture of what looks to be an old, it looks like something you would see in an old Catholic church, like an old confessionary kneeling booth. I'm not really sure. But, very ornate, dark wood, with a couple of little pedestals, like a couple of little steps, reaching up to a booth. So we have containment procedures that indicate that all monitoring of the item's containment chamber must comply to the 2DGS InfoSec protocol. And InfoSec has a capital I and a capital S. And having worked in and around InfoSec for a little while, I'll tell you that nobody capitalizes it that way. But we'll continue. Access to data about the skip is restricted to members of the research group, whose memory must be purged of all other classified data upon recruitment, and each documentation task must be assigned to a single member, and I am afraid that this cryptic procedure might lead to a poor assessment of SCP-4636 related threats by uninvolved Foundation staff. We have a description that says that it is an ornate wooden booth with 3 vertical compartments separated by lattices. Although it resembles a Christian confessional, it has not been traced back to any known group or institution. I am terrified of its insidious action on the human mind. So we keep jumping back and forth between, the traditional scientific tone of a skip and these interjections of how the writer is currently feeling. And in fact, the very next paragraph mentions the distal effects that when attempting to communicate information about the item, we have a footnote there that says, with as little detail as an agent simply mentioning an object with the intent to refer to 4636, all assessed subjects develop a temporary compulsion to express subjective feelings and inner conflicts. So this is a confessional, and it forces people to confess their feelings and conflicts. It then says, I am unreasonably upset by the disruptions caused by this compulsion in this very document. We have an explanation in the next paragraph that says that we believe it's because the skip is deeming conversations about the booth as equivalent to the physical confines of the booth. That is, regarding its anomalous properties, the space it encloses extends to the conceptual space of information about it. I am frustrated that this explanation is not verifiable, making it inappropriate in rigorous technical documentation. And what we basically have is that if there's physical restraints where you try to keep somebody from speaking about their feelings, sound waves manifest expressing the information in the subject's voice within tens of kilometers. And it seemed like the voice was going past my eardrums and invading my brain. And when editing or erasing written instances, they've later been found engraved along with the full context on solid surfaces within tens of kilometers. So this confessional apparently doesn't mess around. It then explains that if 2 people go into this confessional and one person confesses something, the other person will have a permanent compulsion to keep that secret. And if instructed to disclose them in any way, they are unable to do so regardless of incentives. And there's a footnote next to incentives, and it reads, incentives is a euphemism for torture. The item's potential for information security applications has been judged amazing enough to justify tests involving torture. My desensitization training has been worthless, and I am still disturbed by torture. So it then goes on back into out of the footnote. Interestingly, in numerous instances, this inability has been induced by the sentences that were not compelled by 4636. I am currently picturing scenes of torture, which greatly distracts me from writing. So we have a few more of these, and where it goes, I don't understand how it's possible to fail to want something that I wish I could want. The effect of this item is confusing and scary. And we write most of the rest of this in this first person, that it's sort of evoking all of the writer's insecurities and feelings of insignificance. And the last sentence on this is, potential uses of the item in information security protocols and in psychological evaluation procedures are under study. And that's where we end it. This is not, in the grand scheme of what series 4, series 5 skips look like. This is not the longest skip in the world, but this is good. This is really solid. It's one of these that proves that there's still fertile ground all over the place, and you don't always need a big gimmick to get your, to make something worth reading. This is, honestly a fairly tame skip at heart of this confessional that makes you confess things, but it's done with the addition of this twist, this format screw, where they have to confess it in the context of the article. And between the two, it feels fresh, it feels new, and it feels really well done. This is currently at plus 46. I think it is a little underrated even at 46. I think this was really good, and by the time I got to the bottom of it, this was a very easy +1. Also because it does have that cold, not cruel nature of things, where the Foundation's got this thing, they torture people, and they can't divulge this secret that was given to them in the confessional. And what does the Foundation say? Like, that would be pretty useful for our information security team. and that's where we end the work. This was an easy +1. Moving on, we have SCP-4616. It is titled It Haunts the Fields, and it was written by Dr. Chandra. We have no picture visible. In fact, a quick scroll tells you there's no picture at all in the work, and an object class of Euclid, and quite a few containment procedures, a solid 4 or 5 paragraphs worth, involving a containment zone that is staffed by nonviolent D-class with Foundation-provided training or real-world experience in agriculture and operated as a commercial farm. There's a farmhouse that the D-class must return to by sunset, and they need to remain indoors until sunrise. It's fitted with security shutters and a panic room and a covert tunnel that connects the farmhouse's cellar to an extraction site from the containment zone. And anybody that enters the containment zone above ground during daylight hours are to be considered lost. D-class are to undergo bi-weekly psych evaluations via video chat and rotated out at the discretion of psychiatric staff. And in the event that 4616 relocates to another farmstead, it's to be acquired by the Foundation and converted into 4616's new containment zone. And 4616 is described as a humanoid entity of unknown composition and intelligence. It says that it's currently confined to a 400-hectare area of farmland and woods in Black Box. Hectare is technically it's SI friendly. It's an SI approved unit of measurement. 400 hectares is 4 kilometers, and I think that's a better a better unit to throw out there for still being appropriately toned, but a little more accessible to the reader. It goes on to say that 4616 possesses superhuman speed and agility. We have a footnote that indicates it's capable of moving in excess of 150 kilometers an hour, and it can actively avoid and destroy surveillance equipment within its containment zone. So that's why we don't have any high-resolution images or videos of it. It's been described as approximately 4 meters in height and extremely thin, with a hunched posture, almost entirely white in color, with a wide oval head and widely spaced black eyes. And it is either dressed in loose-fitting tattered clothing or it's covered in matted white fur, and its right hand either possesses 3 long curved claws or a 3-bladed instrument of some kind. So we're actually introducing some uncertainty into the description itself just due to eyewitness testimony, and this is possible because I guess the thing moves so damn fast that it's reasonable to assume that we haven't gotten a good visual of it. It goes on to say that 4616 appearances are rare and sporadic during the day, and it's mostly limited to appearing at the edge of the wooded area, and the skip will occasionally wave to anyone present with its right hand, which apparently has long curved claws or a bladed instrument, but it will withdraw into the woods if it's approached. We've sweeped the containment zone numerous times but haven't found any sort of den, so we have no idea where it resides when it's not visibly present. There have been several non-hostile close encounters with it during the day, but these instances have always resulted in it immediately fleeing the scene. And the skip has marked a total of 37 trees in its containment area with crude pictograms in white paint, and it will make simple dream catchers out of available materials like plant matter, recovered clothing, and animal tissue, and hang them from the branches, and we don't understand the significance of this behavior. It also says that during the night, the skip will often leave the woods and inspect the farm, and it will often do useful farm work during these times, but it'll also rearrange items apparently at random, and will sometimes damage property and livestock. It also regularly bangs and scrapes on the farmhouse, likely trying to gain entry, as it was observed breaching the living facilities of its previous containment zones. On nights when it doesn't leave the woods, wailing can be heard for periods of up to 5 hours at a time. We've never observed it making any sort of vocalization, so it's uncertain if it's the source of the sounds. Probably a fair assumption. And if any residents of the farmhouse are outdoors during these nocturnal excursions, it will typically attempt to abduct them. It will never abduct more than one person in a given night, and it will take the victim into the woods. And we have a thing that says, no abduction victim has ever been recovered. That's struck through, and it says, see addendum. So we have a little exposition there with the little strike through, and gives us a clue that something happened. We recovered an abduction victim at some point. And the skip will also attempt to abduct any residents attempting to leave the containment area regardless of the time of day. And from there, we go into if this. One notable pull quote from this is that if any individuals other than the farmhands enter the containment zone at any time, it will violently attack them, typically overturning vehicles and reducing victims' bodies to a semi-fluid pulp within a matter of minutes. It's interesting visualization, like it's interesting mental imagery, but semi-fluid pulp doesn't land. I feel like there's other phrases, other things you could maybe use there instead. And we get into a few of these things that weren't really asked and probably could have been left out, regarding like unmanned vehicles don't produce a reaction, and what happens if the farm becomes devoid of residents or defunct. We go from there into a discovery log, a missing persons report, and MTF Epsilon 6 village idiots tried to get there in time, but several emergency workers were also killed. So we have a cover up as well. An evacuation by helicopter was attempted and failed, and this resulted in 4616 relocating to another nearby farm. And it relocated an additional 3 times before we figured out how to properly contain it. So we go from there to an addendum, and it indicates that on a fully black box date, a ring of 37 oak saplings appeared in the front lawn of the farmhouse, each growing out of what appeared to be a freshly dug shallow grave. An investigation quickly revealed that each sapling was growing out of a human corpse with extensive root networks penetrating deeply throughout their bodies, and these were subsequently designated 4616-A-1 to -37, and genetic testing confirmed that these were prior abduction victims, and the body showed very little decay, and it's believed that the sapling's roots can secrete antimicrobial and insecticides through the roots. And autopsies have revealed that the sapling's acorns had been surgically implanted while the victims were still alive, and due to the lack of decay, it's not possible to estimate how far growth had progressed before the victims expired. So that sounds very reminiscent of, some what were reputed to be torture methods used in East Asia. We go on to have in the addendum that we attempted to exhume all of these corpses, and removing them off-site resulted in the skip going berserk, causing approximately $14,000 worth of damages to the farm the following night. And following this event, it began exhibiting several changes in its behavior. The D class have reported that the skip will now walk on the roof of the house at night, and have spotted it standing on the roof during the day on at least 3 occasions. They also claim it spied on them briefly through windows at least twice, and has taken to running past them at high speeds while they're at work in the fields. Freshly dug holes are often found in the mornings, and the rate of livestock deaths has also increased by 17%. And as a result of these behavioral changes, rotation of D-Class has been suspended until further notice. End article. So we're left with a little cliffhanger here that, we have very obviously disturbed this thing and changed its behavior significantly. And it is not outright hostile, but the changes are very concerning. And we're seeing behavior that we'd never seen before. And that's never good news for, something that's superhumanly strong and fast and, plants trees and live humans and lets them sprout. One of the reasons that I picked this one, because there were a lot of really high quality entries this week, one of the reasons that I liked this is that there is nothing in here to indicate that this entity is at all malevolent. There's nothing in here to indicate that it's behaving in a way that is intended to be malicious. That's really cool to me because it has a Series 1 feel in a lot of good ways, but that is not something you would find in a lot of Series 1 works. That, by the time you've built this thing up, it's, about 14 feet tall, pale and skinny, but really strong and fast, and might have, blades on one of its hands. The thing's damn well going to be, evil as can be. And that's not the case here. That's, sort of subverting the expectation. And that is definitely, I think, working for it, even if it's not. I feel like they could have actually done a little more to play that up, that this is not malicious, that, we don't know exactly why it's doing this, why it's planting these trees or building these dream catchers. It's leaving a lot unsaid. But I feel like a bigger deal could be made out of, the very, docile nature of it under normal circumstances. Just, don't let the thing grab you at night. It's behaving in a way we don't really understand. But it's not, as far as we can tell, it's not evil or malicious. It's just different, and it's not, not behaving like we would expect. So it's a difficult balance to strike. I feel like this got a lot more right than it did wrong. I think this is really good, and it's one of those, it says more with less. It leaves a lot of things open and, unquestioned, and I think that works just fine for this. This is an easy +1. Moving on, we have SCP-4870, titled Something's Wrong with Site-17, and this was written by It's Denali. Now, across the top of this skip, we have a notice from the Foundation Records and Info Hazard Safety Departments, and it reads that the following document regards a Level 2 non-threatening info hazard currently affecting written and typed information at one or more Foundation sites. To prevent unintentional alteration of this document, do not proceed unless accessing this page from an approved site. And then we have a little block quote below it that says, you're currently accessing this document from Site 01. Access approved, retrieving document. So we go from there into the entry itself. So it's kind of giving you a setup that this is a site-based thing that we're dealing with, and that it affects written and typed information. So we go from there into the skip itself. We have an object class of Euclid and containment procedures that read, no iteration of this file is allowed on Site-17 servers at this time, and may only be accessed on different sites' servers until further notice. Moreover, data servers at Site-17 are to be modified with a unique digital signature that will prohibit access to documents that could potentially be modified by SCP-4870. It's not quite as techy as I would like, this paragraph. It does get the point across, though, so we'll keep going. All -1 instances discovered are to be destroyed or reverted to unaffected iterations if possible. So we're going to assume the -1 here are files that have been affected by this anomaly. Research into the cause of SCP-4870 is still underway, and any discoveries on the subject are to be brought to Dr. Jask's attention at once, and any potential inquiries regarding the neutralization of 4870 are to be considered, as no current means to do so has yet been found. And if found, -2 is to be contained at once. So we have a -1 that refers to files, and -2 that we're not quite sure yet, but if we find it, we need to contain it. And due to the unknown and potentially hazardous nature of -2, extreme caution is to be exercised during this process. So it's an interesting set of procedures here. And, we already have a little bit of a clue with the title that, something's going on with Site-17, and it's only Site-17 apparently. And 4870 is described as a phenomenon affecting Site-17, by which the content of certain documents, physically present or digitally accessed at the site, thereafter designated 4870-1, have a chance of being anomalously altered to include text suggesting the existence of a specimen of Gopherus polyphemus. Sorry, that tripped me up a little bit. It should be Polyphemus with a P rather than Polyphemus with an H. I think I'll just make that edit, since they do footnote this as being a gopher tortoise. and that is the proper nomenclature for it. In any event, it's anomalously altered text that suggests the existence of a gopher tortoise designated -2 at or near Site 17. And documents susceptible to the phenomenon currently share one or more of the following attributes. It covers topics of or relating to herpetology, which is the scientific study of turtles and tortoises, directly naming Site 17 if they were written or compiled before 1998, or contain the words substantially, densest, or subterranean. Interesting. And it says that the contents of these -1 write-ins, and that's in quotes, are minor, consisting of brief mentions of -2 phrased in a way that makes the writer appear fond of -2 and refer to it in a positive manner. I really like this idea of it's a tortoise that makes people write nice things about it just by virtue of being somewhere, presumably hanging around the site. So from there we have a collapsible. Right before that it says, you're viewing an archived version of this file. Click below to view its most recent iteration. And then we have a new item entry of SCP-4870 as a gopher tortoise, as we might have suspected. And the procedures indicate that no iteration of the file is allowed on provisional Site 17B's servers at this time and may only be accessed on different site servers. And we're basically building an entirely new Site 17 exactly 1.5 kilometers north of Site 17 for the housing of 4870. 4870 is to be kept in a standard animal containment cell within provisional Site 17B, where it's to be fed twice a day and otherwise kept healthy. I really like this. We're going way out of the way here to handle this tortoise that is, somehow arbitrarily injecting itself into files. A bulk of this article is stuff you could kind of piece together, given what we've kind of built on so far. We have a discovery log that says that while the turtle itself, the tortoise, I should say, was not discovered and contained until later, its right in effect was noticed on August of 2018, and at the time was thought to be an independent anomaly. It was not until September of 2018 that the tortoise has now been identified and was recovered during construction on a section of the south wing of Site 17. Following the breach of an unrelated anomaly, it had apparently dug a burrow underneath the wing and taken up residence there for at least a month prior to its capture. Whether it gained its anomalous abilities before or after having taken up residence beneath Site 17 is unknown, as is why it was present so far from its native habitat range. And we go from there to an addendum, and it is a collection of several -1 instances recovered before the anomaly's containment and relocation. And there's quite a few of these. There's I want to say 8 of them in here, and they're little texts. They're either things from reports, even things like complaints made to the cafeteria, and like there's one here they wanted mashed potatoes added to the Site 17 cafeteria, and there's a line in here that says, I believe that many of the other personnel at the site would enjoy the addition of it to the menu. I wager that even the tortoise would like it. Thank you. And the punchline here, of course, is that they have no idea that it was even added. They never added it. This was edited in after the fact by this anomalous tortoise. There's one regarding neutralizing an anomaly that has to do with the geological stuff at the Yellowstone caldera and, redirecting magma, and part of this is redacted. It's kind of, building up a skip that doesn't exist, and it has a line that says, "We believe this would help relieve pressure on the hotspot, reduce risks to the tortoise, and even allow the eventual establishment of subterranean research stations." So it's that sort of thing all through this, and that's how we end the article, with these little affected little pieces within the universe. It does end with the final edited item being a complaint to Dr. Jasks about the recurrence of a seemingly anomalous references to tortoises and Colonian animals, and concern about a possible meme or cognitohazard present at Site 17. And it reads, Dr. Jasks, I am contacting you concerning a possible mimetic or cognitohazardous outbreak here at Site 17. You know as well as I do that with the number of anomalies and personnel housed here, that memes are running loose can mean very bad things for a very large number of people. Hell, even our tortoise. Whatever this meme or hazard is, it seems to be forcing people to mention reptiles or something of that sort in things they write, after which they will have no memory of doing so. I ask that you bring this to the attention of your superiors and initiate a proper investigation of this phenomenon, lest 17 become ground zero for an outbreak. And that links to SCP-3294, and it says, thank you. And that's where we end it. 3294, I should note, has no direct bearing on the work. It's just sort of a related, contagious meme sort of thing. So that's where we leave this. Just an interesting little slice of life about a tortoise that lives under Site-17 and makes people write nice things about it and, take its welfare into consideration. Not, nothing groundbreaking, but just really, really fun little piece. Last but not least, we have SCP-4043. This is titled Gaia, and it was written by Gentle Gifts. And as you open this page, it is immediately obvious that something screwy is going on, because it is presented entirely as dialogue. And the dialogue is between somebody that, one person that's introduced as an AI, and the other that apparently has some knowledge of the Foundation, and but not enough to really remember who or what or where they are. And we go from this very vague, who am I, what's going on, why can't I remember anything, into an archived entry for SCP-4043. This is titled as 4043-ARC-1. And we have an object class of Archon, and we have a footnote that says Archon class anomalies are anomalies that are theoretically capable of being contained, but are not to be, due to the potentially disastrous effects on the continued existence of humanity. So we have seen something along those lines in other object classes. Hyamal, I believe, is one of that sort, if I recall correctly. I'm always, I've said it before. I think I said it in the Bad Skip Bingo one shot. If you are using a really esoteric object class, something that has rarely or never been seen before, you're in a hole. You start out with a lot of ground to make up and a lot to prove. So we begin with containment procedures that say that the containment of 4043 requires the Foundation to commit to two partially contradictory aims. Firstly, we need to monitor and discredit the Mother Earth movement, and Mother Earth is in quotes, with funding channeled towards political entities and media that seek to disprove or disgrace the movement and their ideas. And similar funding is to be provided towards organizations and individuals which seek to disprove and disgrace telepathic practitioners, shamanism, and mentalists. And secondly, we are to provide funding and support for environmental protection initiatives promoting individuals and organizations which seek to preserve and reestablish natural environments. Politicians, organizations, corporations, and entities which discredit the global warming phenomenon and promote unfettered exploitation of natural resources are to be discredited and destabilized. Interesting. So the Mother Earth movement, not sure yet, but we're trying to cast some aspersions on the thoughts of telepathic practitioners, and we're also trying to protect the environment. As a former Department of the Environment employee, I have no real problems with this. It goes on to say that permanent Foundation presence is maintained above 3 underground chambers located in Costa Rica, the Congo Highlands, and Borneo. We have a footnote that says each location is notable as a biodiversity hotspot. I don't feel like that footnote really buys anything, and I feel like it's sort of a really ham-fisted exposition attempt there. Each location maintains supplies and quarters for 2 MTFs, Iota 4 Mother's Keepers, and Iota 5 Brainiacs. There's a 2-kilometer exclusion zone maintained around and above each chamber, and in order to avoid interference with natural activity, we use signs and cameras as opposed to a proper fence. Unauthorized civilians are to be turned away and administered amnestics if required. Lethal force is authorized for use by Iota 5 in the event of non-compliance by civilians, or unauthorized access by Foundation personnel or rival GOIs. Foundation personnel coming into direct contact with 4043 are forbidden from carrying weapons, poisons, electronic devices of any kind. Individuals with prosthetics, electronic implants, or non-biological augmentations are likewise forbidden from making contact with 4043. Telepathic individuals are permitted direct access, though only through express permission from level 4 or higher personnel, and after being cleared on a Class A mental fortitude examination. So quite a bit of heavy stuff in these containment procedures. And again, we're going to look back that object class as Archon. This is something of quite a significant scope, I'm willing to wager. And the description lets you know that you are correct in your assessment there. 4043 is the term granted to both a vast semi-sentient consciousness spread across the planet Earth and the typically anthropomorphic physical manifestation of said consciousness. This consciousness is a conglomeration of all biomass on the planet, serving simultaneously as the representation of its health, a manifestation of its personality, and a force capable of driving its own success. That's quite a thing, quite an anomaly. Now, I will say, through this description, which is quite long, it's 6 solid paragraphs, there are a couple of lapses in tone and a couple of lapses in things like spelling and punctuation, but the gist of it, and I'm going to sort of distill this because this is quite a long piece, is that twice a week for about 6 hours, 4043 will materialize in one of the 3 locations. There's a chamber underground that it'll sort of materialize in. Being around 4043 makes all sorts of animals, makes them peaceful, even when it's predators and prey. They'll be calm together, and the manifestations of 4043 are skittish if presented with human tech or any weapon that could bring harm to it. And since it was discovered in 1956, these 4043 manifestations have been slowly but steadily weakening, and the telepaths have reported more and more difficulty in identifying the consciousness. So we go from that back into dialogue that says, so 4043 is Mother Nature. And the AI responds, to put it colloquially, yes. And a little more dialogue, and it says, there's more you'll need to know to understand. That file was only the first. It was archived and replaced in 1994. And we go into 4043-ARC-2. This has an object class of neutralized. This uses a good amount of the previous ARC, but in a past tense. There is an addition in the containment procedures of a team of 6 skilled telepaths from MTF Iota 5, and supporting senior researchers is to engage in Operation Seance. The use of Class C artificial telepathy enhancers is authorized for use. A prolonged meditative trance is to be performed no less than once every 3 days in an effort to locate any and all remnants of SCP-4043. And more or less, as you read this arc, you come to the inevitable conclusion that Mother Nature has died, and died in 1992. There is an audio log, a debrief between head researcher John Reynolds and Special Agent Claire Yen, who is the leader of Iota 5, the Brainiacs. And this is all really good dialogue. And Agent Yen confirms that 4043 is a she, and she is dead. And we have, no way of getting back to this previous state, and that 4043's death as being the manifestation of life on Earth. She was life itself. Our fate was tied to her. That we are staring a mass extinction in the face. A lot of complex species, probably including us. And we end that log, and we go to more dialogue that says, I don't get it. Mother Nature died. How did we make it through that? and we have more dialogue from the AI that's sort of explaining what we tried to do. And basically, the Foundation settled on Operation Geneva, which was an attempt to restore the consciousness through artificial means. And the underlying principle was that 4043 is a conglomerate of the lives of Earth's biosphere. So if you had a way to tap into the consciousness of everything on the planet and channeled that connection into a psychic construct, you could restore 4043 to its former state. And the Foundation attempted this, and we go to Arc 3. This has an object class of Keter, and 4043b is currently uncontained. And we are now actively looking into ways of terminating 4043 in this revision of the arcs. And there are some significant differences between this version and the first version. Now, the Foundation is to assist and credit the Mother Earth movement with fundal chanting towards political entities and media which seek primarily to support the movement and their ideas. Public education programs for children which present the idea of a benevolent Mother Nature or Gaia as a metaphor for natural ecosystems are to be produced and introduced into curricula worldwide. Secondly, we are to provide funding and support for environmental protection initiatives, promoting individuals and organizations. This is all pretty well the same thing. Direct action is authorized against egregious offenders exploiting natural resources with deployment of select MTF teams for industrial sabotage of particular factories and mining locations. We have our same 3 underground chambers in Costa Rica, the Congo, and Borneo, only now all those are hotspots that need combat-capable MTF teams, and GOC and other groups of interest are to be warned away but not engaged, since the -B tends to effortlessly destroy any large man-made structures and encounters. Crude wooden signs and cameras are used as opposed to a full fence. In the event that an individual does enter the radius and does not return, they are to be considered deceased. Retrieval efforts are strictly forbidden. We have -B described as the term granted to both a vast artificially created semi-sentient consciousness spread across the planet Earth and the anthropomorphic physical manifestation of said consciousness. This consciousness is a conglomeration of all neural activity on the planet, serving as manifestation of the collective personality of all animals and a force capable of driving its own success. So, some key differences here. This thing is not happy. This thing is not friendly. Again, I'm going to summarize a little bit. It is not benevolent like its predecessor. It has 3 instincts: feed, fight, flee, and fuck. I guess that's 4 instincts, huh? Beyond that, an underlying constant pain can be detected in the consciousness. It will manifest like the first edition did for a period of time of about 12 hours. When it materializes, it's at least 3 meters tall and of a humanoid form. It will wander and doesn't display any aggression towards animals, but will relentlessly attack humans, particularly technology. And due to the extreme size and strength, these events invariably result in loss of human life. Like its predecessor, its existence is beneficial to the success of life on Earth. However, this one has the additional effect of altering ecosystems and behavior in ways that directly harm humans. So it has caused droughts, famines, insect infestations in crops, increasing antibiotic resistance and virulence. We've got new strains of staph, another infectious bacteria, and we basically have a prediction here that new bacterial and viral vectors will cause 90% of the human population to fall victim to untreatable epidemics within the next 10 years. And that's where we end this particular arc. We go back into more dialogue between the AI and this still unnamed person. And so the AI says that we were staring a K-class event in the face. Operation Geneva was declared a failure, and Operation Scythe was enacted instead. And this was a termination method. And Operation Scythe is presented in much the same standard format of an SCP. We have John Reynolds as the overseer. This operation was launched in 1997, and the objective is the termination of both the physical and mental entities comprising 4043B. The parameters: Kantian loss of life protocols are suspended, utilitarian loss of life protocols are in place. Resource expenditure restriction protocols are suspended, anonymity protocols are suspended, and mass aerial amnestic deployment authorized. This is balls-to-the-wall stuff. The consequences of failure: IK-class civilization collapse scenario guaranteed. SK-class dominant shift scenario highly probable. Human-specific XK-class extinction event scenario probable. Consequences of success: IK-class civilization collapse scenario probable, barring other contingencies. XK-class mass extinction event highly probable, barring other contingencies. Near guaranteed breach of anonymity protocols on a global scale. So this has been built up so well that you know the stakes have been laid. We've got absolutely every reason to make these attempts now. The Foundation stared a losing proposition in the face, tried a shot in the dark, it didn't work, and now they're left with, it sort of all ends here in this operation. We have methodology that involves the leader, Special Agent C. Yen, who's to coordinate and direct the activity, and the scapegoat, Special Agent E. Gardner, who's to culminate the activity, and this involves 40 telepaths from MTF Iota 5. And it has the next two paragraphs involving various mental constructs, and they all have different names. It says the team is to first generate a Halcyon-type construct with a Slipknot-type failsafe in mind space to serve as a buffer and protection from SCP-4043-B. We have about another 4 or 5 paragraphs of this. It's all very dense explanation of how telepaths are to carry out this operation. This entire thing, the entire, all of the stuff that we just talked about, dominant shifts, extinction events, this is all the results of this operation that's happening entirely through telepathic means. And, it's very exacting. This particular thing in the system is to be maintained for precisely 23 minutes and 14 seconds, and then this, and then this. And we have, associated risks that involve a runaround loop paradox and all these crazy things. None of it's really expanded upon, but that's okay. I don't, you don't work for the Foundation. You're not a telepath. You don't have to know this stuff. I think this is, technobabble in its purest sense, but I think it actually works really well in the piece. We've, set up this global scale telepathic consciousness, and you need something of sufficient complexity to potentially defeat it. And finally, we have a warning that the long-term consequences are guaranteed for the scapegoat team member. A permanent loss of telepathic ability, long-term loss of fine motor control, and short-term memory loss are the less impactful damages predicted, with insanity or cerebral hemorrhaging also probable outcomes. As such, the scapegoat position is strictly voluntary. Operation results: termination successful. No manifestation events were recorded in the days after the operation. Telepathic detection of mass consciousness returned negative results. Special Agent Gardner was confirmed as deceased in action as a consequence of mass cerebral hemorrhaging. 5 other members have suffered from short-term memory loss after the event, with near-complete recovery expected after rehabilitation. Our fatalities from this numbered 12,098 as a consequence of the operation, most in traffic accidents or falls from heights resulting from the brief loss of consciousness. Mass amnestics were deployed, and cover stories for persisting instances have been provided. These losses are considered acceptable within the confines of the utilitarian loss of life protocols. Operation Overseer Reynolds is to be commended for the successful denial of impending catastrophe. Special Agent Yen resigned from their position as leader of Iota 5 following the operation. So we break from that back into dialogue, and the non-AI entity says, "Damn, that's clever and brutal." The AI says, "Do explain." The non-AI says, "They used a runaround loop. It's normally something you'd want to avoid at any cost because it can cause irreversible cycles of thought patterns if you accidentally dip into it. If you're working in a group, you can set it up between you and a safe space. If you're really clever, you can use the loop to generate an exponentially growing series of outputs so long as the system is maintained. They use that to fuel Icarus types, which enable long-range contact, and Styx types, which temporarily deny any thought. And the result of this is that if my calculations are correct, based on the amount of power that 40 skilled practitioners could generate, multiplied by about 24 minutes of looping, you would stop every living thing on the planet from thinking for about half a second, and anything conscious nearby from thinking indefinitely. 4043 is entirely an entity of thought, built upon the thoughts of every other living thing. If they stopped all that thought for just half a second, it would cease to exist entirely. The AI says, very clever. And the non-AI says, Natasha. Natasha is the name of the AI in this. Natasha says, yes. And the non-AI says, how did I know that? And we have a break here in the dialogue. Natasha, don't avoid me. How could I know that? All that jargon. No one knows that. Natasha says, it is time then for you to know who you are. Well, how many more files are there? Well, just the one. Okay, bring it up. So we now go to SCP-4043-C, Object Class Safe/Archon. We have containment procedures that look a lot like the very first one, that we're supposed to assist and credit the Mother Earth movement and put forth the idea of benevolent Mother Nature or Gaia as a metaphor for natural ecosystems. And we are no longer doing the full-on industrial sabotage of groups that exploit resources. And in anticipation of future manifestation events, we have our 3 hotspots still in Costa Rica, the Congo, and Borneo. We have an exclusion zone, and lethal force is authorized again to keep non-compliant civilians and GOIs out. In the event that 4043-C proves hostile, the reopening of Operation Scythe is authorized to protect human interests. Description: 4043-C is former Special Agent Claire Yen, deliberately ascended through artificial means in Operation Demeter into the role originally occupied by SCP-4043. 4043-C comprises a vast global consciousness, the sum of all thoughts by all life on Earth, filtered through the base framework of a Special Agent Yen's personality. This consciousness serves simultaneously as a representation of its health, a manifestation of its personality, and a force capable of driving its own success. The existence of 4043-C is intended to be beneficial to life on Earth, with the human personality at its core intended to enable a balance between human, natural, and Foundation interests. 4043-C will grow more powerful and capable of enhancing the success of life in a positive feedback loop with the combined successes of human society and natural biodiversity. And we have a little more boilerplate that we saw in the rest of the works going back up, and that in order to assist 4043-C in releasing itself from its state of containment, a neurally attuned telepathic artificially sentient helper, A-Class, which is a nice little acronym for Natasha, was developed and synchronized to a mechanical psychic network. Traditional telepathic aid is not possible due to the rate at which 4043-C processes thoughts, with even simple exchanges taking days or weeks to complete. Rather, an AI was selected capable of stretching the signals into a form coherent to 4043-C and patient enough to await responses. As of last update, 4043-C has been in conversant communication with Natasha for a period of 17 months. So we go from that back into dialogue, and Yen says, 17 months? Natasha says, well, 21 by now, do you see? Yen says, I'm Claire? Natasha says, yes and no, you were Claire. She is a part of you, quite a large part, but not all of you. And we have a little more dialogue and trying to understand how any of this could have been. And we have a moment where it says, Natasha asks, what can you see around you? And Yen says, I see walls. 4 walls, plain white walls, painted concrete. Natasha says, good. I want you to push them down, all the way down. And Yen says, how can I push down concrete walls? Natasha says, because you're the one who built them. They're your walls, your telepathic shield that kept your mind safe from more powerful ones. You volunteered for this, but this is why you were selected. You could automatically keep your defenses up, which would protect you through the transition. So, Natasha, there's a little more asking, I push? How do I push? And Natasha says, and if you do not push them down, humanity and most life on Earth is likely doomed and you along with it. Yen says, somehow I wish you were more cryptic about that, right? Here goes. And there's a lot of waiting, and then Yen saying, it's beautiful. So many minds, so many possibilities. I can see them all. I can push on them all. I can see how to push to make them better, to make them succeed. Natasha says, good, that is your role now, your task, your duty. Yen says, this is who I am now. Natasha says, yes. Now what will you do first? Yen says, I think I'm going to Borneo. Natasha says, excellent. Goodbye, Claire. I shall try to stay in touch. Yen says, thank you, Natasha. And Natasha says, it is so good to see that you are conscious at last. End article. I have a lot of thoughts about this piece. This was an incredibly ambitious work on a number of levels, because anytime you not only introduce the possibility of a real XK or some of these lesser used K-class scenarios like an SK-class dominant shift, and actually come really close to acting on it, you've laid out all the framework, you've brought out a real possibility of actually having those things manifest. You have that. You introduce this object class of Archon, which makes perfect sense. This works within the SCP universe totally acceptably. I'm totally fine with it as an object class. This is of appropriate scale and magnitude that it would work quite well as a 001 proposal. I'm almost disappointed that's not what they did with this, because it is, I suppose the only reason you wouldn't do it is because the timing of everything is all relatively recent, and it wouldn't make sense in the context of making it a 001, but it is of that level of significance. It's almost a shame to have it as just a number like 4043. Would have been an awesome 4,000 or 5,000 even. I love this. This is really good, really ambitious, and really does a good job of building suspense and posing things in a unique way, where this whole moment of how did I understand that? How did I know all that I just explained? Even if you were somewhat predicting that would be the case, the way that it's all posed in the dialogue, really, really well done. And everything in here, the dialogue's good. There are a couple of little things that need cleanup, as far as I spotted a couple of spelling mistakes or things of that nature, but as a very, very small percentage of the whole thing, I'll run through these. If they're just really basic, I'll just edit them myself. But this is criminally underrated, by the way. This is only at plus 35 right now. I'm sorry, plus 32 right now. Very, very much worth your time. Hope you enjoyed everything out of week 3, and apologize for the delay in getting this out to you. This is gonna come out the same day as week 4, so that's where I'm gonna wrap it for week 3. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe via your method of choice. We're available on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, via scp.cafe directly. And of course, always looking for feedback via any of those channels or in the SCP Cafe channel on SynIRC. So I'll see you for the week 4 podcast. And until then, keep reading, keep writing. I'll see you on the other side.